Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Narcissism Decoder. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Mazzella. This is part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Kerry. In part 1, we explored the early stages of her relationship, the idealization, the emotional intensity, and how she found herself deeply bonded to someone whose behavior kept shifting beneath her. We talked about the, and I quote, sweet spot she kept trying to return to, the confusion and cognitive dissonance that set in, and how the relationship began splitting her internal world into good and bad parts that she was struggling to integrate. In part 2, we pick up at the point where everything starts to unravel. The relationship enters cycles of breaking up, reconciling, therapy, and more deception. We explore the trauma bond, why intellect and intelligent people and insightful people get stuck in these dynamics, how therapy can sometimes miss the mark, and the deeper psychodynamic question that runs through all of this. Was any of it real? And what does that question even mean inside a relationship where idealization, manipulation, genuine longing, and a profound injury all coexist? Make sure you stay with us to the very end, because Dr. Kerry and I talk about what real healing actually requires, specifically what it takes to repair the splitting, fragmentation, and fractured sense of self that these relationships so often leave behind. Let's get into it.
But he wasn't changing.
Wait, but so what happened? So let's just go back just a moment. So your therapist, you said, I was wondering, where was the help? Where was the confrontations? Were they there? And you said, actually, they were there, but my therapist put me in a box or in a corner or backed me into a corner. What happened there? And then that's, I guess, what led up to you firing the therapist. Is that right?
I felt like she was frustrated that I couldn't get the point that he wasn't going to change.
I see.
And instead of helping me understand why I was frozen around my decision,
yes,
she was insisting on why couldn't I see the truth that he wasn't going to change.
Yes. I got you.
It would have been more helpful to look at, there was nobody mentioned to me, Kerry, you're in a trauma bond. Somebody had said, yeah, you have a fear-based, I was also in group coaching. They told me you have a fear-based connection, but I didn't know it was a trauma bond. I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was nobody helping me to understand. The reason you're confused is because the confusion is deliberate to keep you stuck because they're using you for supply. Nobody explained all that to me.
Well, that's one way to explain it, but that's part of the split world again. And I don't think that would have been helpful either, quite honestly.
Probably not, because I didn't understand that. I love how Sandra Brown says it. They create a split world. There's a good and bad side of them. You're learning to navigate them, and it creates an interior experience of being split, where there's a good and bad world inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're interacting, all these parts are interacting with each other. I cannot tell you how agonizing that position is.
Maybe this is a good place for us to pivot, right? Because okay. I said there are so many questions, but I'm trying to be mindful of your time. So let me hold off on some of those questions in terms of the relationship. And let's go into this, because I had mentioned to you again offline that I've been listening to your podcast, and there are some things that you say on there that really struck home with me. And it's like, what a wonderful opportunity. I have Dr. Kerry here with me, and we could talk this out. So if you bear with me, I just want to read a little bit of your like what you were saying on the podcast. And I told you already, just because I didn't want any surprises, that you just happened to release a podcast today, right? Mm-hmm. With
Dr. Carter.
Dr. Les Carter, yes. Mm-hmm. And you asked this question, and just to save time, I won't go over every time you've asked this question, but I've heard it in several of your podcasts, but just different iterations of it. So I really want to just go over that and then ask you, did you get this question resolved? And I want to respond in sort of a psychodynamic way and just get your impressions on that.
Okay.
You said, and this is part of what I heard in earlier episodes, I thought it was sincere when I heard my ex say, like, I guess what he was saying is, I really want to work on this. Don't you wish we could go back to and you call it sweet spot. And you're like, yes. So basically what you're describing, just for the listeners to give them some context, is things must have been really good at one point in this relationship. Things were moving along nicely, and then something shifts, right? Perhaps it's you speaking up, right? It could be something as simple as that. So he's saying that he wants to go back, and you're saying, yeah, I'm trying to get back to that. And then the question is, do you think that he was sincere? Was that a sincere expression of regret, or was that idealism? And his response, Dr. Carter's response on your podcast was that the narcissist has such poor insight, right? In other words, they could come over and they could be, you could be talking to them about something about being a bully. And rather than, I respect what you say and I need to consider this, am I really being a bully? They'll flip that around and they'll blame you. Okay. So that's number one. Bear with me. I just want to read one other little clip like that, because this is really troubling me a little bit, because I felt, and I know you really love Dr. Carter, by the way, but I don't feel like he answered your question. Your question was about what was this? Was it sincere? And then in another podcast, you had a guest on and you were describing pretty much the same thing, right? And you asked a question about, him saying, can we go back? And you wanted to go back. And you started to say something and she cut you off. And he said, can it be like that again? Where did that person I met go? I guess meaning Dr. Kerry, that you changed, right? You're not the same person that I met. It's not like it used to be. We were both invested. I didn't realize it was. And then she says, it was all a game. He's just playing a game, right? And to your credit, you're like, well, no, it wasn't exactly a game. Maybe it was his own idealism, right? Like an idyllic relationship, like this magical way of thinking about it all, right? Okay. I want to say again, another guest, you're raising a very, very important question. Something I hear so frequently from my own patients and my own practices. Was this real? And what did it mean? Did he really mean it? And can we go back there? And he wants to go back, and maybe we could go back. Maybe I don't need to leave this relationship, because you see, he wants everything to be like it was before. And then in the second one, just calling it a game, like, let me just keep going and then I'll get your impression, since I'm sort of on a roll here. And both of these, unfortunately, what happens is they don't answer your question, but it's, I think, even more, not deleterious, but harmful than just not answering your question. I think it leans into this whole world that gets created around these relationships, which is there's a split. You see, so you ask legitimate questions and ready to understand this, and they say it's his fault. He doesn't, they're not empathic, they don't understand, or they just play games. And that creates a split world now where it's like, we don't think of things in this way seriously. Like, this is a serious question that we really need to consider. Instead, it's the split. I call it the split because it's like, no, simple world, when things are split, it's just easy. We have a simple explanation for this. And the explanation is he plays games, or he can't talk to you. He has no insight. So, and I have a lot more to say, but I want to see how you feel about that perspective, or if you ever got that question settled in your own mind.
I think I've settled it in my own mind. And I think the reason why people really struggle to talk about it is because it's extraordinarily complex. It's extraordinarily complex. So would like to know how I think what happened?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I think let's go back to, I gave you a little bit of my history, and I didn't give much of his. He came from extremely, extremely violent family.
Yes.
By the way, lived with his mom for 8 months. She confirmed she was not a good mother. And he says, and I believe it's true, that he was not her favorite. He was a middle son who was probably abused severely, probably scapegoated like I was.
Yep.
And she favored the other sons. I actually witnessed it. I believe it's true. So here's a child who desperately wants to be chosen. There is a part of him, I see, an wishful part of him that longs for a sense of belonging and safety and a connection. But I also believe he's very cynical, and he doesn't believe that's possible. And he's learned of predation as a way to keep himself safe. He's learned a way to extract connection with other people instead of being vulnerably connected to people.
Yes. Yep. Okay.
I also was looking for an idealized state of home. I said that's what I thought I found with my first husband.
Yep.
Looking for this sense of incredible safety and belonging and love and acceptance.
Yes.
And he seemed to create that for me when I first met him. And then right after the discovery that he was a serial cheater, when we got to Mexico, we had a sweet experience for a week or two, very brief. Week or two that seemed idyllic, and that's what he was talking about. Can we go back to that spot? Interestingly enough, he broke it. I didn't break it. He texted somebody. I discovered that he was texting a wrong number. It was a wrong number, and he was flirting with this wrong number. Literally, it was that. I mean, that's how he's constantly scanning for opportunities to cheat. He was extremely, in the 1 month split, just to give you how severe it was, 17 conquests in 1 month. So just actively acting out.
Yes.
Horrific level of acting out. He's talking about his longing to go back. Of course, he blames me for the inability to do it, but he's the one that can't go back. We can't go back because he can't go back. By the way, as far as a wife goes, again, think of my history. Compliant, easygoing. I don't challenge. I'm conflict avoidant. I never made life difficult for him other than just to say, please be in the relationship. Just the expectation of please be in this relationship is more than he can bear. That to him doesn't give him the full freedom and autonomy that he's looking for in this relationship. That already to him is constrictive. He actually
And you too,
defined.
but wait, but it doesn't give you the freedom also, or the
No.
autonomy, right, Dr. Kerry?
Yeah,
'Cause
exactly.
you're being so compliant, right? Such a good wife.
Yeah.
You're not free. That's why
Right.
that moment where you finally confronted him, I was like, whoa, I couldn't believe that happened already. But maybe something about being married and on your honeymoon, right? That you felt
Right.
a little more secure at that moment.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
the coercive control literally feels like the walls are coming in on you. Yeah, that's what it felt
Mhm.
like. Is my world was getting smaller and smaller because I was trying to comply heavier and heavier to him to make things go well. I start to push back on the second half of that marriage. That's when I'm trying to get him into the office to meet with the attorneys so that he would turn the company back over to me, which of course he resisted until he needed to.
But this is the way it works. I don't want to say all the time, but I see
Yeah.
that so frequently is when you get someone who's compliant and a good wife, that stuff, all the other feelings that are getting sequestered, split off, pushed away, repressed, however you want to describe it, they seep out. They have to come out.
Yeah.
And then they start pushing back in other ways, or they become, not you, I'm not talking about you right now, but they become passive aggressive. Whatever it is, this other side always needs to get expressed in some way. It can't disappear forever.
What happens with me is I started to want to die.
Yeah.
So it wasn't moving towards acting out against him because, by the way, he's a violent man. I knew that. He wasn't violent with me.
Wait, Dr. Kerry, hold on. Wait. You said you wanted to die, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you were dying. You see,
I
you
was
were
dying,
already
and
dying.
you're right. I was actively dying, but I wanted to die. I didn't see any way out. So my option for freedom was to get out of the world. It's like you have to push back. My pushback was to collapse. I was collapsing.
Let's take a quick break.
Are you tired of feeling like you're walking on eggshells all the time? Do you feel drained, confused, or like nothing you do is ever good enough? Are you stuck in a cycle of elation, then criticism and confusion? If any of this sounds familiar, you're not alone. And that's exactly why I created Office Hours with Dr. Anthony Mazzella. That's me. Office Hours is a low-cost, small group space where you could bring your questions about narcissistic traits and dynamics and the places where you feel stuck. You'll be met with honest, grounded feedback. I'll hold the group with structure, but there's also space for a real conversation. This is a space designed for anyone looking for clarity, insight, and support. If that sounds like you, just click the link in the show notes to join us. Okay, I hope to see you there. Yes. So what you're describing, and I really appreciate this again, because this doesn't even always come through on your podcast too, but I love the fact that you could say this, which is, it's not just like people say these relationships are so addictive, right?
Yeah.
But the way you describe it, it's like I'm trying to think about sort of interlocking unconscious fantasies, right? Like you described his childhood now, you've already described yours, and it's like a perfect fit. So it's no wonder this thing ends up in a recipe of disaster, unfortunately, because the fit is based on, and I wanted to say this, you can never go back. The answer is you can't go back because, again, not your situation, Dr. Kerry, I'm just speaking psychodynamically for a moment, because in my field, this is what we call the shared unconscious fantasy. It's a concept that's had many different names over the years. I mean, it goes back to what we used to call a narcissistic object relationship, a blissful union, a fused relationship. You know all these concepts, right? But the main thing is like, well, you could say, wait a minute, why are you saying that's not real? That was my experience, right? And that was part of your question is, did he really mean this? Like, could we go back? Were these real moments? And the answer is, again, I'm not talking about your relationship, okay? But the answer from a psychodynamic perspective is, it's not real. That blissful union, whatever we call it, the shared unconscious fantasy is not real. Why? Because it doesn't take reality into consideration. And what does that mean? What's reality? Once Dr. Kerry, you or anybody has an opinion, a voice, a sense of autonomy that's different from this other person, it breaks that interlocking unconscious bond. And then the whole thing begins to collapse. So that's what makes it not real.
Yeah. What I said to myself is, Kerry, you can't go back to the womb.
Yeah.
That's literally not possible. Because what I realized, I couldn't put it in psychoanalytic terms to myself, but this is the way I realized it. And I did talk to my therapist who gave me an incredible practical strategy to help me. I realized it was like the book, it's called Are You My Mommy? that book. I don't know the name of the author, but this little bird walks around literally to everything in the world, even inanimate objects, and say, "Are you my mommy?"
Yeah.
And I was looking for that in him.
Yes.
And I couldn't find it in him, nor will I find it in the world. I realized I won't find it in the world. So she gave me a strategy, and she said, "Kerry, I want you to ask yourself," this was the second therapist that I brought on, which really was incredibly, very instrumental. She said, "I want you to ask yourself, when you have this terrible feeling inside you, is this an old feeling or a new feeling?" And that the old feelings are from that longing that you're talking about. And then she said, that's when you, the maternal object in you, needs to step forward and hug yourself. And that was the start of the healing for me. I'll tell you, that has been, I'm feeling emotional. Incredible. It's brought me to the place today, whereas I know that even if I lost my whole entire world, I would be okay.
Well, let's go over this then, because this is the pivotal moment. And I love that we're sort of coming to this point right here in the interview, because that was going to be one of my final questions is, how does one find healing, right? And you said this therapist, who was very helpful and valuable, said, when you're looking for that hug, right, that you have to hug yourself. But that's like, what does that mean? Like, what could that look like? Just, I'm thinking the listeners who are hearing this and they're like, yes, this could be really a valuable lesson, but what does a hugging yourself actually mean?
So back to your question of the practical. Okay, so now let's put it in the timeline. It's 2019. My son is fighting cancer. He gets well in 2020. What happens in 2020? COVID. So just about the time he's well, and I now can start to see because I've been already doing all the precautions everybody else had to do in COVID. You have to do that with a leukemia patient. You wear a mask. You don't touch. You're very careful about what you're exposed to. No dogs, no bait. You know what I'm saying? You're living on all the same protocols that we live with a pandemic. So I've already been doing it for a year. COVID hits. And at that point, he's well. And my sons tell me, you're too close, too invested. We need you to back up and get some space from us. So I go into COVID self-employed, living in a studio with no family because they've now asked for space in a town I don't know, alone. So I go into literally lockdown alone, in isolation.
Oh my gosh.
It was complete isolation for a year. So literally nobody and nothing but myself, except for a writer's group online, and I saw my sons maybe once a week. So I was in complete isolation. So there would be times, this is how it looks, how healing looks, that I would get to the end of myself on something. And usually what I would do before would be reach out to 20 people and get their opinions. And then I would find some sort of subtle of the middle of trying to please them and please myself and do that.
Yes.
But I started to instead say, what is it that I want? And then I would also, here's the harder part. I would not only, though, not ask for anybody else's opinion, and I would kind of listen to what I wanted, but then I would work through the fear of what if I displease somebody? And then said, okay, so if you do, so what? You're alone now. It can't get worse than this.
Yes.
You're already completely isolated, and you're learning to become your own friend.
Yes.
So here's what I discovered. I used to think I'm okay. The me is okay if we're okay. Because that's the way it was in my family and it was the way in that marriage. But I learned that the we are okay because I'm okay. And if we're not okay because I'm okay, then the we is unhealthy, but I'm going to still be okay.
So the we, just very quickly, is who? Who's the we in your mind?
The system, the family, the relationship, the whomever I'm interacting with. You know, if I'm okay, but you and I are not okay, but I'm okay, then that tells me something about us, but maybe it doesn't necessarily tell me a whole lot about me. If I know that, does that make sense what I'm saying?
Okay, wait, hold on.
Okay.
I'm trying to make sense out of it, and I'm picturing it this way. But again, this is my sort of psychoanalytic mind working, which is you're alone for the first time in your life, and like, what a bitter, sweet ending to that relationship. It's tragic, but yet so necessary for it to happen this way, because you're pushed out of paradise, meaning you don't have this shared unconscious fantasy anymore, and you're confronted with aloneness, right?
While writing my own story.
Okay, that's great though. That's great.
Yeah, I rewrote it 9 times.
That's wonderful. And that's where I was actually going to go to is you're pushed out and you're alone. But what I'm hearing is you're not actually alone. So when you ask me, does that make sense? I'm just telling you the sense that I made out of it, which was this is what we call object constancy or object permanence. In other words, you're not alone if you can hold in mind. And I think that's the we that you mentioned a moment ago, that you're not alone. Now, many people...
I never had a we in me.
Yes,
it was
exactly.
I only exist to the degree there's a we externally, not a we internal. There was no internal we.
That's internal. That's right. That's
a strong one. I wouldn't say there was none, but there was not a strong one.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that too, because oftentimes what I hear is there's nothing inside of like remember the narcissist is a completely empty vessel, but none of us are really I don't want to say none of us, but oftentimes we're not completely empty, but we're so guarded, so defended against. There are so many layers it's hard to tap into. So in your case, that was the whole thing, to please, to be compliant, to be the good wife, the good child, right?
Right.
Those are the layers that protected you, or unfortunately prohibited you from getting into the me-we, the thing that you're describing right now. So yeah, so are you making sense? Again, the way that I heard it is, in this period of your life, you're finally getting in touch with what's really another, this is a beautiful way, because we have to start pulling it together anyway. But this is the way that I see healing as well. Just so you know, I don't use the language that you are, but I call it, not that I call it, in my field, we call it integration. In other words, there is this other side of you, Dr. Kerry, that's always been there, right?
Right.
But it's been split off, again, repressed, who knows, disavowed. And now you're coming into contact with this other side. And I think that's like the hug also that you mentioned. That's why I was like, give us an example for my listeners of what's the hug. The hug doesn't have to be a literal hug. It's an internal embrace, as you keep in mind that I'm not actually alone. Like, I could try to make a claim that I'm all alone and I'm suffering, but I'm not actually alone.
Right. I had a really powerful moment that for me, it shifted everything. So I always tell stories. So that's the way I understand things. So financially, I was in a place where I didn't have everything was tied up in land. So I didn't have any cash, and I owed an enormous amount of a bill. I had to pay for the IRS, and I didn't have the cash to pay it. So I was panicking over that, that moment of distress, like, oh no, the world's collapsing. I could feel myself become extraordinarily dysregulated. And then I realized, I said to myself, what's the worst going to happen?
Yes.
So they penalize you with more money, and they make you pay interest. And in worst case, if they even put you in jail, which they're not going to, because I'm going to be compliant. But even if they did that, I would not be annihilated. This is not going to destroy me.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I found it's like, there me is. And she's always been there, and nothing can take that away.
Yes.
So to me, it was a very consolidating moment.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Dr. Kerry, because this is why I appreciate talking to you, because integration came up at the very end, object constancy, the symbolic hug, right? And now you just mentioned annihilation. And as I was listening to you, I was saying to myself, this is not annihilation anxiety. Like, she's not going to fall. Annihilation anxiety means you literally believe that you're going to fall to bits and pieces, like you're going to decompensate. Now, that level of disturbance actually is in some people, right? This is a psychotic level, and it's there, of course. But what I was hearing from you is, I don't think you're going to fall apart. It's not annihilation anxiety. And sure enough, then you use that word. So
yeah.
Listen,
No, I feared it. It because
a fear is different, you see. But a fear is different than
it was held as a threat out there.
Yes.
Shame and literal rejection. But it was. But I discovered that even in my isolation, there is a sense of self that can't be destroyed.
Yes. Well, thank you again. Listen, I want to wrap it up. I really appreciate you giving us so much of your time, Dr. Kerry, and being so honest. I was trying to do it as we went along because I knew we were going to cover a lot of ground, but so many takeaways from this. And I'll probably I'll listen to it again and maybe even record another conclusion just to pull things together. But your honest view of all of this and the way you were able to speak so openly, and how we got to integration, which is healing, split or integrating, pulling back in parts of yourself that hadn't been there maybe ever in your life, but they were still in you. All this was so valuable and helpful. So thank you again.
Yeah. In fact, even the reason I'm honest is because nobody's opinion can annihilate me. So even anyone's judgment of listening to the story, thinking how stupid I might have been. Yeah, it was what it was, and I'm okay. You know?
And just so I'll just add one thing before we say goodbye. If anybody's listening and thinking this is a stupid story, by the way, that's what we call splitting again, right? That's back into the world of splitting. And that's something you need to examine, because that minimizes something that's so nuanced and rich into a simple word, which is stupid. If this spoke to you and you're curious to learn more about all issues related to narcissism, please support the show by subscribing so you don't miss what's coming next. And even more importantly, take a moment to leave a review. Reviews make the podcast easier for others to find, which helps the show grow. The more the show grows, the more I can invest in creating thoughtful content that supports you in understanding and navigating your experiences with narcissism. Okay, thanks for being here with me. I'm grateful we got to explore this one together. Until next time, take care of yourself. Bye for now. Disclaimer alert. The Narcissism Decoder podcast is provided for general information purposes only. The content presented in this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any psychological condition related to narcissism. The content on this podcast should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. For specific advice pertaining to narcissism or any other psychological condition, you could reach me directly. I am an experienced mental health practitioner who is always taking on new patients. If you would just like a consultation, I can do that too.